asked one of my uncles, was it love that kept you married to my auntie? And he said, no. I ain't married your auntie because I loved her. He said, no. Love, that's too much of an emotional process. I married your auntie because she stayed on my neck. I wouldn't be the man that I am today if it wasn't for her. So I asked him about some conflicts because I love talking to men who have been in conflict, who have made mistakes, who have learned from mistakes, especially married men, and can give you an idea of how things go from a male standpoint. So he tells me about one event. He said, there was one time I really made your auntie mad. He said, I was wrong. He said, I was wrong. I made a decision without talking to her. And she was really big on standing firm on what it is that you're going to do and making sure that you communicate things with her, any decisions, because they affected our household. And he goes and tells me, he said, so she was getting on my A. He said, and I hated it. So what I did the same thing I always did. Run into the bars, run into the clubs, run into the parlors, whatever I could to avoid her. He said, and I kept putting up a wall. I kept building a wall against her. And she fought and she fought and she fought to tear that wall down. And eventually the wall was defeating her. That's when I realized I was losing her. He said, every time I made her face that wall, and every time I turned my back against her, because I didn't want to hear the truth about who I was. I didn't want to sit there and sit in my SHIT. I wanted to run from it. I shut down all the time. She couldn't beat that wall, so she turned away from me and she fixed the problems herself. And that's when she realized she didn't need me. And so I asked him, I said, well, Uncle, whenever I talk to my clients, I always tell them you need to be able to put the purpose of your marriage and your relationship, your children, your investments, whatever it is, think from a logical standpoint, put that above the conflict. So that way you can defeat the conflict. And he said, well, baby, I wish you were there when I was around. He said, I wish you were there at that time. He said, because that's absolutely right. He said, had I have put the purpose between me and your auntie and my children in a home above the conflict and stopped shutting down, I wouldn't have went through that hardship. So he continues to tell me, marriage ain't about love. He said, love don't mean nothing. It don't hold nothing. He said, how are you two getting through this journey called life? He said, how are you two fighting the test that marriage and that relationship is going to come with? That's what you need to ask yourself. What tools, what weapons do you all have when you are fighting against the world? Because your marriage and your relationship is going to fight against the world. There's going to be temptation. There's going to be confusion. There's going to be chaos. There's going to be so much. How are you two going to fight against it? Because he told me if you allow the enemy to see any type of weakness in your armor, the enemy is going to go for it. And who is going to be there for you to protect you? That's your helpmate. But he did tell me that it was a hard year because she got tired of him shutting down and she turned away from him. He said, and I thought I was losing everything that I had built because I was losing a woman I love. And I just have to add this little splash because it was so funny. He told me he would always run to my great-grandma mother, and he said it was one day he tried to run to her and he was like, mama, she did this again, yada yada yada. And he said mother took a wooden spoon and smacked him across the head and told him, hush it, I'm a woman before everything else, and you're gonna stop coming and talking to me about this woman because that woman loves you more than you love yourself. If you stop taking her through it, you wouldn't have a reason to run to me. Go home and fix it. I am so glad I talked to my uncles yesterday because those are some strong men, and I love the fact that my uncles are so accountable. But I'm just here to tell you all, if you all are going through any type of conflict in your marriage and your relationship, you can get through it. You all can get through it. And if you feel like it is not you two, then sometimes you have to walk away. And if you have to walk away because this person has broken you down to the core and you are losing it, do so. But fight for your marriage.